Formula One is back. We have 6 Grand Prix and 3 F1 sprints left to decide the 2024 World Championship. Max Verstappen leads Lando Norris by 53 points in the driver's standings, with 204 still up for grabs. So will Max become a 4-time world champion, or will Lando Norris win his first title? Both will be looking to lay down a huge marker in Austin this weekend. So welcome to F1 Nation's preview of the United States Grand Prix with me, Tom Clarkson, and I'm joined by the 1996 World Champion Damon Hill. Damon, how are you, and what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, yes, I've been trying to think of things to do. I had to cancel, get this, right? This is the life of a retired Formula One driver. I basically had to cancel a cycling trip in Italy because I got press ganged into coming to Gianfranco Zola's charity golf tournament in Sardinia, which I loved and I obviously wanted to do, but he kind of came on after I'd booked the cycling. So basically, I had to disappoint the people who put on the cycling, who are very, very important to us because they supported our charity Halo for 10 years or more, raised over £1 million. These lovely guys who organised our charity cycling. Anyway, so I had to disappoint them and go and do a golf tournament in Sardinia. It's a tough life, Tom, and I'm sure you're kind of thinking, you poor thing, you know, and decisions you have to make.
I'm thinking decisions, and was it worth it? Did you play well?
I didn't play great. I got better as time went by, but you know, golf is a massively frustrating thing. But one of the things that happened was we got some waves on last Friday, which was fantastic. So I went to the Witterings, and the sets were coming through 16-second intervals and 10 wave sets. I mean, it was absolutely pumping. So thank goodness for
you, Damon. Yeah. You and Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri Bottas has been in the Baja, California.
Is he?
He's obviously trying to get in. He's trying
to
get
did he
into
get there in
time
bicycle
zone for the US Grand Prix.
He gravel biked all the way to Baja. He's a bit of a star on those gravel bikes now, isn't he? I mean, So has he taken up surf? Oh yeah.
Have a look on his Instagram. He's a good surfer.
Yeah, no, he did. When we went to Melbourne this year, he was at the Urban Surf in Melbourne, and I was there with him when he was doing a bit of surfing there. So he's obviously got the bug.
He's got the bug, and he's trying to get in the time zone for the US Grand Prix in Austin, because, as I said a moment ago, Formula One is back. We've had an unprecedented autumn break, at least in recent times, but it's race week again. And, I mean, Damon, the return of F1... It's 53 points, the gap between Verstappen and Norris in the Drivers' Championship. How excited are you about Austin this weekend? And who do you think is going to win?
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not Red Bull have stopped the rot and whether they can manage to turn things around a little bit for Max, because they have to, because definitely McLaren have found something. Despite the attempts to clip their wings a little bit with changes to the regulations and all this rear wing, this sort of mini DRS thing that they came up with and various things. I think the teams are looking at them very closely and thinking, what are they doing that's made them so successful? Because I mean, it was 20 seconds for Lando in Singapore, which is a pretty convincing victory, but different kind of track, much more load going through the cars in Austin. So different kind of pressures on the tires and how the car behaves around there. So think back to Silverstone. I think it's probably a good comparison. Fast-ish, change of direction, heavy load, fast cornering. So how did they do at Silverstone? It could be even Mercedes are strong there.
Well, Mercedes have a big upgrade. Ferrari have a big upgrade. Red Bull have a big upgrade. We're not clear yet what McLaren are going to bring to this race. Such was their advantage last time out in Singapore, as you've just mentioned. In terms of stopping the rot, to use your phrase, I feel that Red Bull went a long way towards doing that in Singapore. I thought for Max Verstappen to finish that race in second place at what has been a bogey track for that team for so long was a great effort. And I think we're going to really see the pecking order for these last 6 races is going to become apparent in Austin once we see what all the upgrades do. But Damon, we also have a new face, or not so new, but new for this season face back on the grid this weekend, because Liam Lawson returns to Formula One after replacing Daniel Ricciardo at VCARB for the final 6 races. Liam competed in 5 races last year when Ricciardo was injured, scoring his first F1 points in Singapore. And he now has a huge opportunity to earn a full-time seat on the grid for 2025. And he joins us now from the United States. Liam, it's great to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very, very good.
This is a huge opportunity for you, isn't it?
Yeah. It's literally once in a lifetime, and it's something that I need to take with both hands. So I got a shot last year. I knew it was temporary last year. That was about trying to give myself a shot full time at getting a seat, and now I've got it. And obviously, you get one shot at this, so it's very important.
Can we just throw it back to the moment you found out you'd be driving this time around? I mean, where were you? Who told you? What was the deal?
The idea of me jumping in is something that Christian told me a year ago, but when I stepped out of the car, that was one of the things he said to me is that, he said, I give you my word, I'll basically have you in a race seat at some point next year. So I always knew that was the intention, and it'd been talked about. But I mean, as you know, Formula One is a roller coaster, and every weekend things change. So 1 minute it looks really good, and then it doesn't look good. And it's all depending on how the guys are actually going. And it's a bit horrible, to be honest, because you're kind of sitting there wondering what your chances are of driving it, and it completely depends on how the guys that are currently driving are doing. And you don't obviously want somebody's downfall to be your way in, but for me to drive, somebody has to leave, obviously. So there was no clear route of who, where that was going to be, though. So it wasn't like in 12 months time you're going to switch with this person. It was, in 12 months time we're going to have you a seat, but we just don't know where yet. So that was kind of where throughout the year the discussions were being had, and it was actually Baku time where Christian finally told me that I'd be jumping in.
Liam, you talked about another driver's misfortune being your opportunity. I mean, that is unfortunately how the sport works, isn't it? With only 20 seats on the grid, you say the opportunity only knocks once or something, but it wasn't not last year because of Daniel's bad luck. You got an opportunity, which is why you're really where you are now, because they tested you out. You found out what Formula One was about. You found out what you could do. We found out what you could do. So this is really kind of like, it's a bit of an odd thing, isn't it? You've yet to come into the season at the beginning of the season, having had a whole winter's preparation, but you've had kind of another 6 months off in between.
Yeah, I know. And to be honest, this year's been the most unique, the strangest year, and probably something I knew that I would miss driving the car because, obviously that's what we want to do. What our dreams is to race cars, especially in Formula One. And I knew that stepping back into just a reserve role with no racing program, I knew that I'd do a lot less driving. That was really my only concern. But what I realized very quickly is I actually missed the competition side. I actually missed racing. I missed not having a season. Like I've raced in a championship since I was 7 years old every single year until this year, basically. And this year I've done no actual racing. There's been no championship or competition. It's just been little bits of tests here and there.
Liam, that Pirelli test last week at Mugello couldn't have come at a more perfect time for you in terms of getting you sort of race sharp again.
Yeah, and to be honest, the way the day went as well with Pirelli, as much as it probably wasn't the most fun day for a racing driver, because we want to do short runs, quali runs, low fuel. We did none of that. It was very much long runs the whole day on heavy fuel and no DRS and just consecutive laps. But it was, as you say, probably the best thing for me because in the end we did 116 laps of just basically, long running and getting comfortable driving a car again.
That's the sound of success with Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform that makes it easy to start, run and scale your business. Whether you're selling gourmet chocolates or artisan coffee, Shopify is on hand to help you sell online, in person, or even on social media marketplaces like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. With all the tools you need to grow without the need for coding or design skills, Shopify gives you total control. From a sleek POS system to an all-in-one e-commerce setup, you can manage every aspect of your business effortlessly. Plus, with award-winning support and a library of business resources, Shopify's got your back every step of the way. It's incredibly empowering for entrepreneurs, no matter where you are on your journey or how big your goals are. It's time to get serious about selling and get Shopify today. This is Possibility powered by Shopify. Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/nation, all lowercase. Go to shopify.co.uk/nation to take your business to the next level today. Shopify.co.uk/nation.
Liam, you are a New Zealander, and New Zealanders love their sport, probably as much, if not more, than the Aussies. But you're representing your country. I know from driving for New Zealand teams, Murray Taylor was the team I drove for in F3, and he's been in contact with me even as I carry on in my career and as a broadcaster in Formula One, reminding me that there are New Zealanders on the way up, and your name came up. And so there's a lot of people behind you pushing you forward. What a roll call of honour you have from New Zealand. You've got Denny Hulme, you've got Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon, and, a whole load of great drivers. How does that feel, spearheading that charge?
It's something that I absolutely feel. I feel that the support from the whole country, it's grown over the last couple of years to what it is now, and especially from driving last year. Going home over the break, over January, after doing those 5 races, to see the support at home was very, very cool. So, motorsport in New Zealand, it's very, very hard, and it's something that, from when I was a kid, I was very aware of how unrealistic this dream is. But at the same time, it's also, as much reason of why I wanted to pursue it, to basically show everybody that it is possible, because it has been a long time since we've had, we've only had Denny Hulme, who's won. Denny Hulme's the only one who won the championship, I think, from New Zealand. Yeah. So to succeed in Formula One is extremely tough, and it's extremely tough from New Zealand. And I definitely feel the support from home, which is very, very cool.
And what have you been told by the team, by Red Bull, that you need to achieve in these final 6 races in order to get a seat next year?
Basically, they're expecting me to perform at least as well as Yuki, I would say, is what the goal is from the team. They want me to match him and basically perform. They want points. Obviously, the team is fighting for 6 in the constructors, and that's quite important for the VCARB. So to basically score points is the goal. And, if we're scoring points, then I think at that point we're basically doing a good job. So that's the target that's been set. But we're always being evaluated. It's been like this since I was 16, joining with Red Bull. It's always performance-based. We're always under evaluation. So it's no different really to how it's always been.
Liam, it's got a reputation for being a pretty tough proving ground in Red Bull. They don't cut you too much slack. Can you tell our listeners a little bit what that's like, being a racing driver in that environment?
I think honestly the hardest part is when you're very young, and for me it was when I was 16 years old and 17 years old, my first year with Red Bull. That was, going from not being with a junior team and just having, my guys from New Zealand who have helped me get to where I was at that point, to then have Red Bull Racing and have Dr. Marko calling and putting the pressure on you. And that was what I really struggled to deal with. So to be honest, since then, because it's always been like that.
What sort of things does he say? Do you say you're not doing well enough, or you have to do better?
Yeah, it's normally a 6 a.m. phone call or something like that. And it'll be, you need to perform better. He said that, next weekend, if you don't perform better, you're in trouble. You need to basically win races. You need to basically it's quite often if you haven't had a good race, if this continues, you don't have a future with this team. It's very cutthroat, but honestly, dealing with that, I'm so thankful to have gone through that with Helmut, honestly, because to now be at this point to go into Formula One, it's a huge amount of pressure to step into Formula One, and without having that kind of pressure from a young age, I don't think stepping in at this late of the season, or stepping in, like last year, for example, as well, I don't think I would have been able to deal with it without having gone through 5 years of having Helmut.
Is the pressure more now, this time around, than it was last year, or is it less now?
It depends on your perspective. Honestly, from where I sit, the pressure doesn't really change, because the expectation is the same as it's always been. They always expect us to perform. Every time we drive the car, there's an expectation to perform. There was last year when I drove, and it was trying to have a shot at getting a full-time seat, and now I've got it, and now I have to try and stay in a full-time seat. And honestly, the pressure side of it, you can look at it in many different ways and maybe see that this is more pressure because they expect a similar job to last year, or even more than last year. But because I know that every time I drive the car, they're expecting me to perform, it doesn't really change. It's always going to be like that.
Is there the lure of a Red Bull Racing seat next year alongside Max Verstappen? Is that something that is even in your mind, or are you purely focused on trying to retain the seat at VCARB next year?
It's not in my mind, but I'm definitely aware that being in the second team to Red Bull Racing, that's the future. If I do a good job, is going to be going to my goal is to go to Red Bull Racing in the future, and I know that obviously from their side as well, they're trying to look for the future of Red Bull Racing for when either Max and Checo eventually go somewhere. Then they always need drivers to be ready for that. So I'm basically aware that if I do a good job, that's where my future is. When that can happen, that's not something I'm really thinking about, because I know that it's going to completely depend on how I go in my current seat.
So, of the 6 races, Liam, which one are you looking forward to most? You did Qatar last year, so at least you know what to expect in terms of the heat at that race. But is there one you're particularly looking forward to?
I can't say I'm super excited for Qatar if it's going to be anything like last year, but at least apparently it's not going to be, which is going to be a lot nicer. Obviously, the heat last year was something that I've never experienced, and just getting through that race was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But I'm excited to go back there in different conditions, let's say that. And for the other races, I'm excited for Austin. Honestly, right now, it's a race that even as reserve, I enjoy going to. The atmosphere in America is very, very cool, especially in Austin. So yeah, excited for Austin. The track layout looks really, really cool as well. It changes every year because of the surface being built on a sort of like swamp. It changes basically every year, the sort of surface, and now we have some resurfacing, and it's going to be a bit of new learning for everybody. Other than that, I would say Brazil, a lot of history. Obviously, watching some great drivers drive there, and a lot of history there. So I'm excited for Interlagos, and then I'm pretty excited for all the tracks. To be honest, there's not really anything I'm not looking forward to.
You're cock a hoop about getting the drive, really, aren't you? It's
Yeah,
it's
pretty
just
much.
getting
Yeah.
your hands on a Formula One car and entering a competition is just about as good as it gets.
It does. Yep.
Well, Liam, from all of us at F1 Nation, look, best of luck with everything that's coming up. It's hugely exciting for you, for your country, for VCARB. So good luck with it. And I suppose quite nice to have the grid penalty with the power unit change and everything this weekend. As Christian Horner told Damon and I a couple of weeks ago, bit of a soft landing this weekend.
Don't you believe it?
It is, but at the same time, it's the same thing with, with how much pressure you put on yourself as a driver. Everybody puts different, everyone thinks about and has different perspectives on things. But for me, I think I want to have the best possible opportunity at performing. And you could look at it like, yes, there's less pressure because I know that I'm starting off the back of the grid. But at the same time, I think as a driver, you want to have the best opportunity possible. And I know that that's going to hinder me for the race. So it's not all green flags, let's say that.
All right. Well, look, best of luck. Look forward to seeing you, and enjoy the rest of your preparations this race week.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Well, Damon, it was great to speak to Liam. He is incredibly articulate. He's very good at this side of the job, isn't he?
Yes, I mean, there's 2 ways you can be, I suppose, in terms of sport and talking to people in interviews, is that you can be trying to, express a kind of another personality, or you can be the professional racing driver. And I felt like he keeps something back. He's not telling us all about himself. I think he wants to get on with the job. I think he knows that his life is dedicated to driving and being a professional racing driver. So I think he fulfilled that in the interview. I think he showed that he's serious. And I've never seen him do anything, because he's been around the paddock now for a few years, just in the background lurking. Poor old Dan Ricciardo's been looking over his shoulder, and there he was every time he turned around. And of course, I think he is businesslike. I think he's not there to mess around. I think he came across as a very serious contender, and then that's good. That's what you want. You want a guy who wants to get on with the job.
And I think in that environment, you need a guy who can deal with pressure. And I found it fascinating what he was saying about relishing the pressure from Helmut Marko. If you've had a bad race, it seems to me if you have a bad race in the junior formulas as a Red Bull junior, Helmut only rubs it in. That was a bad race. If you do that again.
Yeah, I think, but there's something to that. And I think there's something positive about that. There's a lot of placating and giving people a soft landing sometimes from bad results. And I think that's not the real world. That's not how life is. You have to be alerted. If you're not on the right track, you have to be alerted to that. It's much better you get someone saying it early than saying much too late, you didn't do well enough and I'm sorry, you're out, if you thought you were doing okay. And I think that, when I started with racing, I thought I was doing okay. And I got very clear indications from Patrick Head. Frank Williams was a little bit more quiet, but I got the indicators clearly when I needed them, and that's really important. And my dad was very tough. My dad always said he was very, very hard on himself, and he was hard on others as well, because I think this is the nature of the business. The question is whether or not you do it in a way that crushes someone's spirit, or whether you give them the motivation. And it's always a kind of a carrot and a stick operation, I think, trying the psychology of sport. I challenge you to find a champion in anything who has not been really hard on themselves. If they needed a kick up the backside from someone outside, then maybe they probably responded to that or needed that.
And you talk about carrot and stick, and I think Red Bull is unique in that the stick is Helmut Marko and the carrot is Christian Horner. Helmut with the threats about keeping the performance going, and Christian Horner telling Liam, look, we will put you in the car next year. Very much the carrot. So, and what did he say? He said that, he's been told he's got to do as good a job as Yuki Tsunoda. And I think everything that we saw in the 5 races he did last year for the team suggests that he can do that. And I mean, Damon, do you remember the opening laps of the Japanese Grand Prix last year? Maybe it was the opening lap, actually, I think, where Tsunoda and Lawson were side by side going through the S's of all places, which is a very narrow piece of racetrack, and they gave each other racing room. And I think we're going to see more of that from those.
Yeah, it's difficult,
which is what Red Bull want,
because they really are both fighting to retain something, aren't they? I mean, but you've seen enough drivers, Tom. You've commentated. You've studied racing drivers. You will not give a guy credit unless they demolish their opponent. That's the marker, isn't it? They have to really finish ahead of their teammate. I call him opponent, but actually they're teammates, which is the same thing. But basically, that's where you find out whether someone has got the potential to go all the way to the top or not.
Yeah, and if you're going to be a challenger for Max Verstappen in the second Red Bull seat, then he will have to not just do as good a job as Yuki Tsunoda. He will, as you say, have to beat Yuki Tsunoda. Right, Damon, let's look ahead to the US Grand Prix this weekend. Now, we haven't had a sprint schedule since Austria back in June. So here's a quick reminder for the listeners of what to expect. On Friday, we have free practice 1, followed by sprint qualifying. So good luck, Liam Lawson, with that one practice session. Then on Saturday, we have the F1 sprint. This weekend, that's 19 laps with championship points on offer for the first 8 cars, starting with 8 points for the winner. That's then followed by qualifying for Sunday's race. And then on Sunday, we have the 56-lap US Grand Prix around the circuit of the Americas. Now, it's fast, it's flowing. Just, Damon, racing driver head on, what kind of challenge does COTA present?
I think it's a great track. I think it presents quite a lot of challenges, not only from the setting up point of view, because of the bumps and so forth. And these cars are particularly sensitive because of the aerodynamics to ride height changes. So I think they've done some resurfacing, I've heard. You heard that Liam was talking about it being on a swamp. I think it's on some sort. Anyway, it's got a lot of earth movement going on there. So I think they're going to have to resurface it almost every year to keep any smoothness. But it's a bumpy old track.
It's like Interlagos, isn't it?
I mean,
it's like Interlagos in that way.
So they have to contend with that to change of ride height, and any car that has been very super sensitive to ride height change in high loaded corners and so forth will be difficult to drive. So you've got to be committed. It's got some slightly technical bits, and it's got some interesting last few sections where you got blind corners, blind dropping away corners, which are always really difficult because the front end always seems to wash out. But anyway, a longish straight and a great first corner for the start. So great to race on, great venue. I mean, they bring all the marching bands and all the rest of it out, and then you see the people on the hillside going up to turn one. You could get an idea of how big the crowd is. And I went on this last year. I went to the infield and went to the amphitheater area where I could watch some of the qualifying, and lying in the grass with like I was at some sort of concert. It was fantastic. And I went to the big tent where they had all the catering and so forth. I was queuing up with everyone to get chips and
were you recognized in the crowd?
Yeah, I was recognized a little bit. Yeah. But I mean, a lot of Americans are kind of fairly new to Formula One, so I didn't get overwhelmed by it.
And in terms of performance, we've talked about how the cars, these ground effect cars, like to be run low to the ground. We've talked about the bumps, and people who remember last year's race will remember that Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc were disqualified after the race for their skid block being worn away too much, more than the margins allowed by the FIA. So the resurfacing should help that, and I think we might see a few more conservative ride heights from the teams this weekend. And in terms of performance, I do think you get racetracks where teams perform well, where they have form. And I think Red Bull have form at COTA. Max Verstappen has won the last 3 races in Austin, and I just think that the aerodynamic package, if you like, that Red Bull have brought to this latest regulation works at Austin. So with the upgrade package they're going to be running, it will be fascinating to see how much, if any, of the performance differential they can claw back to McLaren.
We shall see. I mean, McLaren are very strong, and it seems they're very strong almost everywhere they've been to recently. And of course, there's 2 drivers he has to contend with. It's not just one, is it? It's Lando and Oscar. So yeah, they've got their work cut out. And again, I think that this could be a place that Mercedes could go well at. Obviously, Lewis has had a lot of success there as well, so he loves the place. But Ferrari, don't discount Ferrari. We keep forgetting them. They're there.
Leclerc on pole last year.
Yeah. So it's all to play for. I think Max has got his work cut out. I mean, I think these guys have to spend their resources thoughtfully. By the end of next year, they have a completely redundant car. So the energy they put into the research they put into these cars, or leading up to the start of 25, it's almost pointless, because the following year they're going to have different cars and different regulations. So they have to work out how when they start pushing the boat out, and how much of the resources they use between now and the end of this year, or over the winter. So they're preparing the 25 car now.
If you are challenging for the 2025 World Championship, do you actually continue developing the 25 car late on into next season and sacrifice 26 a little bit, because you've got the chance of winning the World Championship? I'm reminded of 2008 when McLaren and Ferrari were going at it hammer and tongs, Massa against Hamilton. One of them won the Constructors' Championship, and of course Hamilton won the Drivers' Championship, his first of the 7 that year. But both of those teams, that when we had this big regulation change for 2009, suffered in 2009. And the team that actually pulled out of Formula One at the end of 2008, Honda, and was reincarnated as Brawn, which had been focusing the entire 2008 season and a lot of the 2007 season on the regulation change, hit the ground running, and Jenson Button wins the title. So it is that delicate balance, isn't it?
There is, and we've seen it before, haven't we? When there's a regulation change that's come in, the teams that get a longer run up for it, whether it's Mercedes or Red Bull, they seem to dominate the first few seasons. But the equation they have to work out as race teams, it's very difficult. But I never discount them. They're absolutely astonishing how they manage to manage their resources and their time. But the top teams still manage to do it better than everyone else.
Well, Damon, have a think about who you think is going to be on the podium in Austin. But before we actually discuss that, there is one big piece of news that I think we ought to touch on, is that Haas and Toyota have formed a technical partnership. And I think this is huge news for Haas, because it's in addition to everything that they have already, all of their existing relationships with Ferrari and Dallara. And Haas boss Io Komatsu has been talking for a while about wanting to improve his team's reaction times in terms of getting developments on the car. And that is all about resources. And I think that is what he's going to be getting by being able to use Toyota Gazoo Racing's headquarters in Cologne, which for racing fans, they'll know that Toyota's uber successful sports car program, WEC program, and their rally program, World Rally Championship program, are run from Cologne. And I think it will just give Haas a little bit more resource. They're already doing a recruitment drive. They're increasing staff numbers by 10% at all of their factories in Italy and in the UK. And then this partnership with Toyota is going to give them greater resource. It's going to give them greater cash as well. Toyota are going to help fund a proper simulator for Haas to run from the UK. And it's going to allow Haas to run a 2-year-old car program, which all of the other front-running teams have been doing to develop young drivers. Toyota are going to be front and center of that. A lot of their own young drivers are going to be run in that, but it will just give Haas more resource, more capability to develop engineers, to develop their current car. And I'm really excited for them, I must say. What's your reaction to that news?
I think this is the big opportunity for Haas. I think this connection to a huge motoring manufacturer, one with an incredible reputation and market share, and also technology, because they are leading the way in many ways. They led the way with hybrid cars and self-charging, or they're right on top of everything with regard to the way that the automotive business and the automotive world is going. So yeah, it's huge for Haas, and I think from now on, people have to regard Haas as potentially a formidable player in the sport.
Yeah, and Esteban Ocon leaving Alpine, going to Haas in 2025. Ollie Behrman, of course, signed up, another Brit on the grid there. So it'll be really interesting to see what Haas can do, both short-term and long-term. All right, Damon. Well, it's been lovely to catch up. Now, those podium predictions that I mentioned a moment ago, what are you thinking?
I'm not making any. That's what I'm thinking. I mean,
no, but that's not part of the game.
Can I just restrict it to a mark? Can I just say there's going to be a McLaren, a Red Bull, and a Mercedes or a Ferrari on the podium? No? Can I do that?
So you think 3 different cars, 3 different teams are going to be represented
honestly,
on the podium?
this is. I think this is a very difficult call. I mean, I think that McLaren's form basically has to put them there as a potential winner. And if it's not McLaren, it'll probably be Max and a Red Bull. But I think there's a cigarette paper between Ferrari and a Mercedes being up there. Probably Lewis, because of his love of the place and his previous record. So crikey, I don't know, very difficult to call.
So just to
no, you're not nailing me down. I'm not gonna. There's no way.
I'm trying to interpret what you're saying. I think you've just said Norris for the win.
I think Norris because he's fighting for the championship. It's going to be very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to getting back to racing. I'm looking forward to the US Grand Prix, as I always do. I'm not going to be there this year. Maybe next year I'll go.
I think you're right on McLaren. They were brilliant, obviously, in Singapore last time out, but they have also been incredibly strong on circuits that are quite similar to Austin. Look at, Austin's got some fast-flowing sections. Look at Norris's performance at Zandvoort. Utterly dominant. But then Mercedes are going to be bringing new floor parts. I think there's something on the front wing as well. James Allison has spoken, a technical director at Mercedes, has spoken about it being a significant upgrade. Well, what can Lewis Hamilton, George Russell do with that? Ferrari bringing a new floor as well. That seems to be where all the performances on these ground effect cars. So very difficult to call. So I think Damon and I are both sitting on the fence. But if you were to put pressure on me, I'm going to say Lando Norris for the win, Max Verstappen second, Lewis Hamilton third. There you go. I've said it.
You're agreeing with me. That's what you're doing. You're agreeing with me.
Is that what it is?
So that's
okay.
Good.
And we're both agreeing.
Great minds think alike, Tom, or it's a couple of idiots clutching at straws.
Yeah. And neither of us has mentioned a Ferrari, so watch out for Charles Leclerc, last year's pole sitter. Now that Formula One is back again, I've got some much needed admin to do for our F1 fantasy team, F1 Nation Racing. Damon and I both think the podium in Austin will be Lando Norris, Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, so I've made sure we have all three of those in our lineup. And even though he has a 10-place grid penalty for Sunday's Grand Prix, thanks to VCARB exceeding their PU allocation, I've added Liam Lawson to the team because he was such a great guest on the show, first of all, and I think he could still get some points in F1 Sprint and the upcoming races after Austin. I've also thrown in another star rookie in the form of Franco Colapinto, so that's Norris, Verstappen, Hamilton, Lawson and Colapinto, with Haas and Williams as our constructors. And remember, F1 Fantasy is free to play and you can join our league at any time. Just search for F1 Nation World Championship 2024 to compete against us and other listeners. And don't forget, you have until the start of the F1 Sprint on Saturday to make changes and lock in your team. Good luck! Well, that is pretty much it for this week. Damon, as ever, thank you very much for joining me. Great to chat, and thanks to Liam Lawson. Good luck to Liam this weekend. A couple of notices before we go. This week's episode of F1 Beyond the Grid is with Oscar Piastri's race engineer and Olympic silver medalist rower, Tom Stallard. That was a fascinating chat, and it was good to go to McLaren last week to speak to him. If nothing else, by the way, Damon, they are creating some more car parks at McLaren. So whatever happens in this World Championship, they will come away with more car parking space at the end of the year, come what may.
I'm sure that our listeners are so relieved to hear that, because so many of them will be driving to McLaren in Woking, which is actually only up the road from where I live. But I mean, good for them, more car parking space. But I'm interested to hear that Tom Stallard interview. What a great sportsman he is anyway. So that'd be good.
He really understands what it takes to win at the top level of professional sport, whether that's the Olympics, whether that's Formula One, because of course he worked with Jenson Button in the past as well. So that's out from Wednesday. And also there's the latest episode of F1 Explains, which answers your questions about downforce, and you can hear both of those shows right here on your podcast app. Well, thank you very much for listening. We will, of course, be back next Monday from the heart of the Austin paddock with our review of the United States Grand Prix. But for now, F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.